Over the last couple of weeks, I have been utterly, completely, absolutely consumed by Vinland Saga. But hold on a moment, not just Vinland Saga, but Askeladd, one of the characters from the show.
So, we all know about this character, right?
We get to meet him almost immediately upon starting the show and literally in the first chapter of manga. But since the beginning of manga starts a bit oddly, I will be mostly following the anime's timeline, but I will touch upon some of the manga panels for additional insight on his character. On the surface, Askeladd is a leader of a large band of Viking mercenaries who demands high prices for his services while having an attitude and proves that he has the skills to back it up. Physically, I don't know how many people will agree with that take, but the moment I saw him, I thought that he is drawn a bit differently. It's almost as if he looked like a Viking and not like a Viking at the same time. And also, he's so hot, like, oh my god. Another thing that attracts immediate attention is his Roman breastplate. And also, while I touch upon his fashion choices, I must say that he is so iconic. I absolutely love his outfits. I mean, look at them, so many variations. There are many shots throughout the anime where we see his men, and some of them wear literal rags wrapped around their heads. Some go to fight with bare torsos. It sort of gives an impression that Askeladd, compared to them, is rather wealthy, which is also supported by the amount of red accents he has on his clothes, as red was one of the most expensive dyes in that era. There are still some extremely interesting details when it comes to his equipment, but I will leave those for the end of the video. In order to properly decipher his motives and personality, we need to look at him through the lenses of a few major events, starting with the death of Thors, but in the context of his morality. In his own words, he can accept any job as long as the compensation is adequate. He doesn't shy away from capturing slaves, doesn't really value the warrior's honor if it means that respecting it won't fulfill his deal. What's so incredible about this event is how strongly Thors engraved himself in Askeladd's memory and how lasting of an impression he made. But this is where my character study gets a bit complicated, and I feel the need of jumping around the timeline to share my thoughts. Askeladd is a horrible person. He uses emotional manipulation, deception, and can mask himself over the course of years with such expertise that even the people who spend majority of their time with him can't see through his disguise. There are only a few occasions where he chooses pure, undiluted honesty, and 2 other instances where he turns the truth into a joke. I will start with the second time.
俺の主は俺がついていきたくなるような男であるべきだ。なんてな。
This clip is connected to a few other quotes that I will now present to you.
俺は悪党の中で40年余り生きてきてな。そいつがどんな奴なのか、大物か小物か、利口かバカかパッと面見ただけで分かっちまうのさ。
And finally, the moment I fell in love with this man.
本当の戦士には剣などいらぬ。
俺たちの狩猟にならんか。なんちってね。
Do you see where I'm going with this? Askeladd recognizes the essence of a true warrior that Thors embodies. He was so impressed with Thors that he genuinely wanted him as a leader and perhaps even a mentor. One detail that might be just me reading too much into the whole plot is that I noticed how Askeladd in very specific scenes mentions his Artorius ancestry. At the beginning of the duel with Thors, before Askeladd got a chance to test what this famous troll of Yom was all about, he called upon his father's name, a person he loathes. However, after the extremely vulnerable moment and Thors demanding Askeladd to honor his word of keeping the rest of the sailors intact, he calls upon Artorius. I genuinely believe that this is not a coincidence and it was absolutely intended in the writing. Still, The lack of response from Thors and the prolonged vulnerable moment pushes Askeladd to one side of his inner conflict, completing the job Floki had given him, while also turning the situation into a joke. To summarize the notes about his morality, I want to add that as the leader of Vikings, he follows the custom of raids and thus enables deaths of civilians and acts of rape, even though he himself is not once shown claiming a woman. Prior to the duel with Thors, he also gives the command to capture the kids, directly supporting slavery, which, knowing his background and that his own beloved mother was a slave, is a contradiction. Another contradiction is choosing to send Atli off with a bit of financial help after the man and his brother betrayed him. Askeladd is a person who always considers his own benefit first, so it's a really confusing decision that he made, right? On the surface level, yes. The last duel in the context of his purpose. Askeladd's childhood is filled with struggle, hard work, and bearing the responsibilities that should have never been pushed onto a kid. In his own words, accepting his grim reality was not a problem, because he was born into it and didn't know anything else. But to his mother, who had experienced a fall from grace from being a noble Welsh woman to a sexually exploited slave, the events took a toll on her sanity. Young Askeladd was the only person that she had and whom she relied on, which those who like to learn about mental health will recognize just how difficult such situation is. All these circumstances created an environment in which he began hating his father and plotted to seek revenge, and as we know, he was very successful with it. During Askeladd's monologue after the futile duel, he mentions the reactions of his brothers and shares this crucial insight into his own character.
バカで不潔で、ああいう美しくねえ奴らがそこら中から湧いて出てきて、いくらぶち殺してもキリがねえ。
What makes this quote so significant is that it shows us clearly that despite him managing to get his revenge, there is still a much stronger feeling that drives his decision making, and that is simply hatred. Askeladd had been programmed by his mother to glorify the myth of Artorius and his Celtic/Roman heritage, while simultaneously being exposed to indifference and violence of his father, who represents Danes and Vikings. In the scene where he tortures a man for information, he has a visible reaction to the man calling Danes beasts. He responds to the hostage, teaching him some history about how the British Isles were once home to Celtic tribes before Romans came and enriched their culture. Then, the peace was disrupted by the Germanic Anglo-Saxon tribes, who cast away the Celts into barren lands of Wales, while taking the most fertile lands to themselves. Then he says another crucial line.
お前たちは暴力でこの地を奪った。俺たち伝人はお前ら以上の暴力でこの地を奪う。
Askeladd is the purest embodiment of the rule fight fire with fire. The reason why he has no problem supporting slavery, ordering raids on civilian villages, participating in battles, torturing a hostage for information, you name it, is because in his mind he leads one group of vermin into another group of vermin and performs pest control on both of the sides. Some of his men die? Good! Anglo-Saxons die as well? Awesome. His hatred, however, as noticed by Bjorn, is also internal, which I imagine is amplified just by how much he resembles his father. He acknowledges his own intelligence and skills, as I mentioned at the start of the video, but has a sort of realistic approach when it comes to recognizing a person more fit to take on a specific role. We see that exact situation play out when Canute asks why he won't make a move to take over the throne. He openly tells him that he is just a simple Viking. Again, a sign of internal loathing. Something which makes me sad is that his mother, knowingly or not, decided his second name should be Artorius, as if he didn't have enough weight on his shoulders since being a child. I personally interpret it as sort of passing on a torch. Askeladd witnessed his mother's suffering and took it upon himself to fight for the benefit of Wales, and since he is not a god or a hero, he will do anything that's possible for a human being to keep her home country safe. Keeping Wales safe is his only modus operandi up until he looks upon Canut's face and chooses to believe that he may grow into a king who brings the Artorius level of utopia into existence. And the change in his demeanor is again noticed by Bjorn. Then he is quite literally ready to sacrifice his life for the sake of the prince on 3 different occasions before his last stand when Canut himself stabs him in his heart. It shows that in the very last moments when Sweyn asks Askeladd to pick between the prince and Wales, he chooses a third way, beheading the king, as both the value of the prince and Wales have become equal. Relationship with Thorfinn. Askeladd's initial approach to Thorfinn mirrors the way Olaf looked upon his illegitimate son, with just a slight difference. At first, Thorfinn's presence amongst the crew is acknowledged, then purposefully ignored. Askeladd, who was probably still shaken by the purity of Thor's heart, and seeing his own reflection in the child Torphin, decides to make the revenge easier for the kid by sleeping with his back facing the door. He notices Torphin inside the room and patiently awaits for the sword to drop, but it doesn't, as Torphin realizes that Thor should not be avenged in such a dishonorable way. Starting from that moment, we see the signs of Askeladd becoming Torfin's father figure. Then he accepts the duel request properly, and even though he is slightly amused, he quickly becomes bored and finishes it. The reason why I think that Askeladd Thorfinn is a mirror of Olaf Askeladd is because of this one moment. This could genuinely kill the Viking leader, and although he doesn't fail to protect himself, much like his father, he recognizes the potential in the child in front of him, and in a surprisingly soft moment, as soft as you can get after repeatedly kicking a child, guides him towards living a life of a warrior. It is not confirmed how many duels these two had, but I am very confident in saying that there were no duels between the first we see in the anime and the second duel in the Gorm's village. The reason behind my suspicion is that Askeladd comments on their previous duel and seems to realize for the first time in years that Torphin grew in height. It's like that one annoying aunt coming over to your house and saying how she changed your diapers but you have no freaking idea who she is. This also shows that Askeladd really doesn't pay any attention to the kid. I saw a take saying that during this particular duel, Askeladd is actually shown being afraid of losing and potentially dying, and this is why he chooses to mock his father. While I see why one would make such conclusion, I personally think it's not exactly the fear of dying, but actual, genuine realization that Torphin had become a threat. Would Torphin manage to defeat Askeladd if he didn't pull his S+ rage baiting strategy? Absolutely not, as right after Torphin disarms him, he wants to grab his forearms much like he did during their last duel, which makes Torphin disengage. He would absolutely not lose that duel. In fact, I believe that Askeladd doesn't need to rage bait him at all. So why does he do it? Because he's an asshole! Again, comparison to one of the last episodes in the season 1. We actually don't get to hear any mockery about Thors during the fight, and afterwards, Askeladd explains that each time the blood rushes into Thorfinn's head, he is a lost cause. My interpretation is that just the sight of Askeladd with the prospect of taking his life is enough to get Thorfinn riled up and give away his intentions. Aside from the dueling, Askeladd realizes how important honorable vengeance is to Torphin and dangles it in front of the kid like a carrot. Still, there are some moments which prove that he doesn't mind his company and knows that he can rely on him, for instance, when assigning Torphin to guard the prince. While I'm writing and recording the script, I just realized that a few years ago there was this internet trend about men thinking of the Roman Empire, and I just realized how silly it is in context of Askeladd. My favorite thing when it comes to their relationship is the end of the epilogue and Askeladd's last words to Torphin, as well as his appearance in the season 2 of anime, and also the later chapters of manga. Askeladd, like no one else in the show, understands revenge and hatred and how empty life becomes when these are the two main driving factors behind it. I watched an interview with Makoto-san in which he said that he hadn't thought about Askeladd's advice until he was writing and drawing that chapter. It was almost as if Askeladd himself wrote these lines, and I find it to be extremely beautiful. He tells Thorfinn to surpass his father and figure out his life's purpose, but the shock of Askeladd's passing is not enough for it to stick with Thorfinn. So later on we get to see Askeladd in a nightmare, and then the message is very clear. Let go of the violence and atone for the lives you took, not by forgetting about them, but by making sure you never hurt anyone again. Cool details. As we know, Askeladd wears a Roman breastplate. There's a scene of him pulling it out of a chest and being around his mother's grave, but for the love of me, I can't find it now to show you. On top of that, the breastplate is being recognized by the old man from Wales who operates the ferry. His sword appears to be unique. Throughout the series, there are multiple frames of weapons shown, and only his sword has that dragon-like decoration on the guard. Considering the size and the placement of the guard compared to the blade, it resembles a Roman gladius, while keeping the decorations typically Celtic or Nordic. Somewhere in the manga, it is also shown with a snake wrapped around the blade. In his last stand, he is wearing a Roman toga. The bracelet that he generously gives away to Atli and Thorgrim is a Roman armilla. Also, one thing when it comes to that I forgot to mention is the reason why giving away the bracelet was not a contradiction is because Atli showed that he is capable of love, thus making Askeladd recognize that he is not quote-unquote an ugly man, like Askeladd's brothers or his father or other Vikings that he hates. The iconic flourish he performs with his sword has no roots in Roman or Celtic military traditions and is apparently an influence of Eastern media. The closest thing I was able to find was Chiburi, which also implies that Askeladd is a bit theatrical. There are two times when Thorfinn comments on a difference in Askeladd's aura. The first one is in the throne room, right after Sweyn disrespects Askeladd's mother. The next one is after Askeladd takes Bjorn's life and starts the duel with Torphin. Some of my favorite Askeladd's lines, besides the ones I already covered.
このアシェラッドチューのはドイツだい。ぜひお目にかかりたいんだが。困るな。お約束のない方、ちょっと。
If you made it thus far into the video, I am so grateful and truly appreciate your time. If you are Askeladd watching this video, please consider my wife application. I swear to God, I have no Danish or Germanic heritage in my DNA, so we will get along very well. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or takeaways from this video, please share. I'd love to read some comments. Thank you so much for watching the video and have a nice one.